In the sunlit kitchen, I was hurriedly preparing breakfast. Toast popped up from the toaster, its inviting aroma filling the room. We live in a quiet residential area in the Phoenix suburbs. It's been 3 years since we moved here. At 7 a.m. on weekdays, this would normally be when my husband James is taking care of our daughter April. In our bright, white-themed kitchen with its newly installed island counter, April sits in her usual spot. "April, I'll be taking you to your checkup today," I call out. April, who was drinking milk at the kitchen counter, looks slightly surprised. She seemed unsettled by this morning's departure from routine. "Not Daddy. Today's special. I can leave work early for once." April, still in her pink pajamas, rubs her sleepy eyes and tilts her head in confusion. Her bewildered expression sends a twinge through my heart. Lately, I've been consumed by work. I handle major medical cases in the claims review department at Blue Cross Insurance, and I'm at a crucial point with an upcoming promotion review. I work overtime past 8 p.m. 4 days a week and come in on weekends 2 or 3 times a month. To be honest, I haven't been spending enough time with my daughter. On the 42nd floor of the office building, I recall a conversation with my colleague Sarah from last Friday. Looking out the large windows overlooking Phoenix, our afternoon coffee breaks were always precious moments of respite. "Have you been able to see your little girl lately?" Sarah asked with concern, holding her white coffee mug. She glanced at the mountain of documents on my desk, clearly worried about my situation. "My husband's been handling the school runs." I trailed off as Sarah gave me a gentle smile. The leaves of the office plant by the window swayed in the afternoon sunlight. "You've got a good husband." "Indeed, he is an ideal father. He volunteered to handle school pickup and drop-off, helps with baths and changing clothes. From making lunch boxes in the morning to reading bedtime stories at night, I was filled with gratitude for my husband's thoughtful attention to detail. His expressed desire to cherish daddy-daughter time earned high praise from family and neighbors, often inspiring envy. The construction sites calmed down. I want to support my wife's career. I wanted more time with our daughter. My husband, who works as a construction site supervisor, suddenly started saying he had more free time. His explanations seemed perfectly natural, without any hint of oddity. I was able to focus on my work, grateful for his support. However, this morning I finally had time to spend with my daughter. Looking at April's expression, a pang of regret hits me. Perhaps I should have made more time to be with her. "Mom, these eggs are too hard," April's voice snaps me back to reality. The sunny-side-up eggs were indeed a bit overcooked. Another wave of guilt washes over me for not being perfect at housework and childcare. But today is different. Today, I'm determined to make it a special day with my daughter. After breakfast, April went back to her room to change into her uniform. As I clean up the dishes, I mentally organize today's schedule. The checkup is at 2 p.m. I'll need to leave the office right after finishing the important morning meeting. There's a mountain of cases on my desk, but just for today, I want to prioritize my daughter. With this resolve, I check the clock. It's almost time to leave. One day, When I returned home from work, my husband was sitting in the living room with an unusually serious expression. April fell at the playground today. But don't worry, I took her to the hospital. At this sudden news, I nearly dropped my bag. Is she okay? Just some minor scrapes. They've been treated already. My husband continued explaining in a businesslike tone, without looking up from his computer. I had her checked at the local clinic. They said not to worry. She's resting upstairs now. Such reports had become common over the past few months. Falls, bumps, stumbling on stairs. Each time, my husband would take her to the hospital and handle everything appropriately. While I was grateful to be able to focus on work, something kept nagging at the back of my mind. The Phoenix Pediatric Clinic's waiting room is relatively empty, with a few parent-child pairs quietly waiting their turn. April sits next to me, silently looking at a picture book placed in the clinic. Usually, she would beg, "Read this to me," but today she's unusually quiet. The receptionist nurse occasionally gives us a warm smile. The walls are decorated with bright posters for children, and educational programs play on the TV. But even in this thoughtfully arranged space, April seems unable to open up today. April Wilson. At the call, April tightly grips my hand as we stand. A middle-aged female doctor greets us with a warm smile as we're shown into the examination room. On her desk is a stethoscope shaped like an animal to delight children. The walls are decorated with growth charts and colorful animal illustrations. "Hello, April." The doctor begins the routine examination with a gentle voice, checking for fever, appetite, sleep patterns. The checkup proceeds smoothly through height and weight measurements and vision tests. "Could you take off your clothes for me?" What should have been a routine request suddenly caused April's body to stiffen. Her small hand clutches my skirt tightly. "It's okay, Mommy's here." I gently stroke April's head as I speak. Although April slowly nods, her eyes show an anxiety I've never seen before. As April fearfully begins to undress, her small back trembles slightly on the examination table. The doctor professionally places her stethoscope and checks April's breathing. However, when her hands move to examine April's back, the doctor's expression changes completely. A moment of silence weighs heavy in the room. "Mrs. Wilson, we need to discuss something important." The doctor's voice has lost its earlier gentleness. With a serious expression, she exchanges glances with the nurse. "I apologize, but could we speak privately in another room?" While the nurse stays with April, I follow the doctor to the adjacent room. In the small consultation room, surrounded by white walls, my heart pounds violently. The doctor indicates a chair and sits across from me. In her hands, she holds the tablet used during the examination. After taking a deep breath, she begins speaking quietly. "We found multiple injuries on your daughter's back and the backs of her thighs." The doctor holds out the tablet. I'm speechless at the photos displayed on the screen. Countless scars marked on April's white skin. Various bruises large and small, and numerous injuries that appear clearly man-made. These injuries cannot be explained by accidents. We must conclude there is a very high probability of abuse. But my husband said. I desperately try to recall my husband's various explanations. Falls at the playground, collisions with friends, slipping on stairs. But the evidence before me contradicted all those explanations. Mrs. Wilson, we need to report this to the police. The doctor's voice seemed to come from far away. My mind goes blank. From the adjacent examination room, I can hear April talking with the nurse. That casual conversation makes the current situation feel even more surreal. My precious daughter. Someone had definitely been inflicting injuries on that small body. The emotion of being unable to accept this fact and the desire to know the truth immediately clash violently in my heart. I could feel my hands shaking. The doctor nodded silently, already reaching for the phone. Within 30 minutes, the Phoenix Police Department's child abuse response team arrived at the hospital. 4 women in navy suits quietly mixed in among the doctors in white coats. Other patients sat anxiously in chairs lining the hallway. Nurses explained the situation carefully and guided them one by one to different examination rooms. The team is led by Detective Catherine Murphy, a woman in her 40s. Her shoulder-length brown hair is tied back in a ponytail, and she wears a calm navy suit. A 15-year veteran, she exudes trustworthiness beneath her gentle demeanor. Next to her stands Amanda Collins, a child welfare officer. In her late 30s with a kind smile, she has extensive experience dealing with child abuse cases as a child psychology specialist. Her cream-colored blouse and black pantsuit create an atmosphere that puts children at ease. 2 more female officers accompanied them. Both are experienced members of the child abuse specialist team. The 4 move with practiced coordination, dispersing to their respective positions. All maintain trained expressions while handling the situation with definite warmth. Let's start by calmly organizing the situation. Catherine sat down in front of me as I trembled in the consultation room next to the examination room. On the desk lay the tablet showing April's examination results. Soft afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, and the wall clock showed 3:15. I don't understand any of this. My voice shakes. My vision blurs, and I take several deep breaths. The water in my cup trembles with small ripples. Let's go through this one step at a time. Please tell me about April's recent behavior. Catherine's voice mixed the coolness of a professional with the gentleness of a woman. Her hand holding the pen over her open notebook was steady. I found some reassurance in her posture. Well, let's see. My husband started handling the school runs about 3 months ago. I began recounting the events of the past few months while gathering my memories. How my husband suddenly became enthusiastic about childcare. The frequent reports of injuries. And how April's behavior gradually changed. As I spoke, various unsettling feelings I hadn't noticed before began surfacing one after another. Catherine occasionally nodded while taking careful notes. Beside her, the officer posed supplementary questions, revealing more details of the situation. Meanwhile, April had been guided to a different room. A special space called the children's interview room. Forest animals were painted on the walls. Squirrels, rabbits, bears, and foxes smiled gently as if from a fairy tale scene. A soft pink carpet covered the floor. In the corner stood a small wooden desk and chair, surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books. A small surveillance camera was installed in one corner of the ceiling, and in the adjacent room, I and the police officers would watch the interview through monitors. The camera was positioned discreetly to help reduce children's anxiety. Amanda gently sat down next to April. In her hands, she held a brown stuffed dog that children would like. Her voice echoed softly, matching the room's bright atmosphere. "Isn't this a lovely room? Would you mind if we talked for a bit?" April gave a small nod. Amanda began a casual conversation while gently swaying the stuffed dog. "Would you like to give this puppy a name?" Max. Max, that's a lovely name." The conversation continued for a while through the stuffed animal. You could see April's tension gradually easing. Amanda moved into the main topic with perfect timing. "April, where do you go after school?" April clutched another stuffed animal on her lap more tightly. After a moment of silence, a small voice escaped. "Linda's house." In front of the monitor, my heart raced. Linda. A name I'd never heard before. Beside me, Catherine immediately took notes. "What kind of person is Linda?" Amanda continued her questions while gently watching April's expressions. Her posture remained calm throughout, never rushing April. The room's warm atmosphere drew out the girl's words. "Daddy's special person. But scary." April's voice trembled. Her small hands gripped the stuffed animal's ears tightly. At this gesture, Amanda narrowed her eyes for a moment. "Why is she scary?" "When she gets angry, she hits me and pushes me." At these words, the air in the monitor room froze. Catherine immediately gave instructions to her subordinates and began the investigation. Her movements were quick, showing years of experience. The police response was swift and organized. First, they retrieved records from April's after-school care program. Bluebird After School Care Center. There, important facts were recorded. Starting a month ago, April had suddenly begun having frequent absences. The contact person was her father. The reason column simply stated family circumstances. Analyzing the frequency and pattern of absences revealed a concentration on specific days of the week. Tuesdays and Thursdays, and sometimes Fridays. On these days, April consistently missed after-school care. Testimony from after-school care staff revealed that all contact from the father had been by email, with no face-to-face interactions. The reasons varied each time: feeling unwell, family business, grandparents visiting, but all lacked specificity. The unnatural pattern of absences raised new questions. In parallel, they worked to identify the person called Linda. The manager of Sunrise Garden Apartments testified about a woman in her late 30s who had moved in 6 months ago. Information was gathered that she was quiet but often received male visitors. Valuable testimony also came from apartment neighbors. The same man always comes, recently saw her with a small girl, car often stays parked until late at night. The testimonies gradually outlined the facts. A decisive testimony identifying the man as my husband came from a 7-Eleven clerk. He comes in work clothes from the construction site with his daughter. They always buy snacks and drinks and walk toward that apartment. And the most crucial evidence came from security camera footage near the apartment. Cameras were installed at the building entrance and parking lot, recording 24 hours a day. Mrs. Wilson, please look at this footage. The tablet the detective held out showed my husband's car entering and leaving the apartment parking lot. A silver Ford Escape. Undoubtedly my husband's car. And April was always in the passenger seat. The footage was recorded intermittently over the past month. All times of entering and leaving the parking lot were recorded. In the footage, the car always parked in the same spot. The security camera captured this location at a perfect angle. Images of my husband and April getting out of the car and entering the building. My husband leaving alone and going somewhere. Then returning late at night. Sometimes the car remained parked there until late at night. All the evidence pointed to one fact. A woman named Linda Morrison lives in apartment 303 of this building. We are investigating her relationship with your husband, James Wilson. Catherine's voice was quiet, but each word carried heavy meaning. An unknown reality was being revealed before my eyes. My husband's betrayal. The existence of an unknown woman. And above all, the abuse of my child. All the dots were connecting. Meanwhile, in the adjacent interrogation room, April's testimony continued. The truth was gradually revealed through Amanda's careful questioning. Linda's behavior. The relationship with Daddy. And why she couldn't tell anyone. Watching April on the monitor screen, I was overwhelmed by my own powerlessness. Catherine quietly placed her hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Wilson, we need to take action immediately to prevent any further harm. I nodded silently. Before me lay the police complaint form. With trembling hands, I picked up the pen. At a large construction site in suburban Phoenix. The strong afternoon sun cast shadows of heavy machinery and materials on the ground. As workers busily came and went, two black SUVs glided up to the site entrance. Inside the metal fence grounds, a half-completed high-rise reached toward the sky. A crane rotated silently as workers' voices echoed. No sirens or rotating lights. However, the bearing of the officers who stepped out of the cars carried an unmistakable tension. Led by Detective Catherine in her navy suit, 4 officers headed toward the site office. Their presence drew the attention of the workers. Everyone stopped their work to watch what was happening. Inside the prefab office, the afternoon routine workflow meeting was in progress. A complex workflow chart was drawn on the whiteboard, with blueprints and documents spread across the desk. My husband, who had been giving instructions at the center of this, briefly clouded his expression upon recognizing the officers. Mr. James Wilson. Detective Catherine addressed my husband, who was checking the workflow chart. In his work clothes, my husband showed a confused expression. Sweat beading on his neck revealed his tension. "What's this about?" His voice trembled slightly. The site supervisor and workers who had been participating in the meeting held their breath as they watched. Only the ticking of the clock pointing to 3 p.m. echoed in the silent room. "You're under arrest for aiding and abetting child abuse." At that moment, the air in the office froze. Colleagues at their desks turned around with shocked expressions. The arrest of the site supervisor everyone had trusted. A man known as an enthusiastic and good father. No one seemed able to accept this reality. My husband momentarily gripped the edge of the desk tightly. So tightly that the veins stood out on the back of his hand. However, he quickly dropped his shoulders in resignation. He lowered his eyes, as if avoiding the gazes of colleagues he had worked with for years. "I understand." The quietly presented handcuffs. My husband docilely extended both hands. The metallic sound echoed through the silent office. No one could speak. The gazes following my husband's back mixed confusion and disappointment. Outside the office, reporters had already begun gathering. Someone must have tipped them off. Microphones and cameras bearing the logos of local TV stations and newspapers stood in clusters. Amidst camera flashes, my husband was escorted to the black SUV. My husband got into the car silently as reporters' voices flew about. His colleagues watched the scene without a word. No one could reconcile this sight with their co-worker who had been working normally just moments ago. Reality felt unreal. Meanwhile, at Sunrise Garden Apartments, room 303. A police perimeter had already been established around the building. This 5-story apartment building housed middle-class residents. Balconies lined up neatly against the beige exterior walls. Tension filled the usually quiet afternoon hallway. Uniformed officers were positioned at both ends of the third-floor hallway, considering the possibility of escape. From the elevator hall, plainclothes detectives walked toward room 303. Their footsteps were absorbed by the carpeted hallway. The sound of knocking echoed through the hallway. Not a sound came from inside. The curtained windows revealed nothing of the interior. After another knock and call, faint footsteps approached. The door opened, and a woman who appeared to be in her late 30s peered out. Her bare face looked tired, and her loungewear was somewhat disheveled. Her black hair was carelessly tied back, with dark circles under her eyes. "What do you want?" A guarded voice. The door chain remained fastened, and the smell of the room's interior leaked through the slightly opened gap. Cigarette smoke and stale air. "You're under arrest on suspicion of child abuse." At these words, Linda's expression transformed. Her already pale face grew even more ashen. "I haven't done anything." A scream-like voice. A motion to close the door. But there was no escape now. The officers quickly responded, holding the door. The chain was removed, and officers entered the room. Linda stood frozen, not even attempting to resist. The messy interior came into view. About 750 square feet of space. Magazines and clothes scattered on the floor, children's clothes thrown on the sofa, half-eaten snacks on the table, coffee cups with hardened stains. A single photograph decorated the wall. A picture of her with my husband. Taken at the beach, it captured the smiles of what appeared to be a happy couple. Children's toys were piled carelessly in a corner of the room. Stuffed animals, coloring books, crayons. They must have been April's. Though they looked new and clean, they gave off a cold impression. Like decorations for the room. There were no signs that children had actually played with them. Dirty dishes had piled up in the kitchen, with the smell of garbage wafting from the sink. Notes were held to the refrigerator with magnets. They showed my husband's name and various dates. Evidence of planned rendezvous, perhaps. Linda was silently handcuffed and escorted into the hallway by officers. Neighbors peeked through barely opened doors to observe. Everyone wore expressions of disbelief at what had been happening in this quiet apartment. In the police station interrogation room, surrounded by gray walls, my husband hung his head. Fluorescent lights illuminated his exhausted expression. Across from him sat Catherine. A recording device on the desk blinked its red light. "I've been involved with Linda for 6 months." My husband's voice was surprisingly calm. As if talking about someone else's affair. "We first met when she was a construction materials supplier. Gradually became closer." "What about the abuse of your daughter?" At these words, my husband's expression momentarily distorted. I knew, but I wanted to continue the relationship. At those words, Catherine's expression hardened. A man who prioritized his desires as a man over being a father. That confession filled her with indescribable anger. In her 15-year career, she had seen various cases, but it was rare for a biological father to act so irresponsibly. "Please explain specifically. When did you notice?" "About 2 months ago. I noticed April's injuries and confronted Linda." My husband continued speaking matter-of-factly, staring at his clasped hands on the desk. "And then she apologized. Said she'd never do it again. That Linda was just lonely. Yet you continued to bring your daughter there." Catherine's voice grew cold. "Yes." My husband's voice grew smaller. "I was afraid of ruining my relationship with Linda. I didn't want to lose her. More important than your daughter." To that question, my husband couldn't answer. He just trembled and hung his head. The air in the interrogation room grew heavier. "And your wife?" "I didn't want her to know. I felt guilty about my busy wife." Words that could be either excuses or confessions continued. Only the recording device tape continued turning silently. In the adjacent interrogation room, Linda's questioning proceeded. A space surrounded by white walls. A paper cup of water on the desk. Linda hadn't touched the water. "I felt like that child would take James away." Linda continued talking while unconsciously tearing up tissues on the desk. Her gaze wandered, occasionally glancing at the interrogator's expression. "That's why you used violence." "I meant it as discipline. I didn't like her attitude." Before the interrogator, Linda tried to justify her actions. Her hands trembled, her voice rising. James was mine. She was in the way. Taking away our time. At these words, the interrogator frowned. Like a child fighting over possession of a toy. But the reality was that this had inflicted deep wounds on a child. Specifically, what kind of violence? Linda fell silent. She lowered her gaze, staring at the mountain of torn tissues. However, the doctor's report and April's testimony told everything. The bruises on her back. The marks on her thighs. And above all, the deep wounds carved into a small heart. Do you wish to exercise your right to remain silent? The interrogator's calm voice echoed. Linda slowly raised her face, looking at her counterpart with vacant eyes. I loved James. That's all. A voice devoid of emotion. It sounded like the words of someone who didn't understand the gravity of their actions. Outside the interrogation room, I held my daughter. April looked exhausted, nestling small in my arms. Our new life would begin now. It wouldn't be an easy journey. But never again would I entrust my beloved daughter to someone else's hands. The incident was reported in the evening news. The arrest of a construction company site supervisor. Child abuse by his mistress. And the father who continued to allow it. Sensational headlines filled the screen. Reporters' voices echoed in the police station hallway. But for us, this wasn't just news. This was the first step toward a new beginning. Gripping April's small hand, I strengthened my resolve. 6 months have passed. We found a new home in a quiet residential area on the east side of town. A bright 2-bedroom apartment. Morning sun streaming through the windows casts warm shadows on the white walls. Though we were full of anxiety when we first moved, now hope is definitely sprouting. April's new room is decorated with pale pink wallpaper. She chose star-shaped stickers herself and stuck them on the ceiling. They emit a small light at night. Her favorite spot is the study desk by the window. There she does homework, draws pictures. Little by little, she's regaining her childhood time. Her smile is gradually returning, notes the veteran counselor at our weekly counseling sessions. Yes, and she's having fewer night terrors. At first, April was plagued by nightmares almost every night. I spent sleepless nights with her. But now, I can hear her peaceful breathing as she sleeps. The trial ended last month. Linda received a 3-year prison sentence. The court recognized her planned and continuous abuse, finding no room for leniency. My husband received 1 year for aiding and abetting child abuse. Additionally, he was ordered to pay settlement money and monthly child support. Severe sentence handed down in child abuse concealment case. Watching the local news anchor report dispassionately, I was overcome with complex emotions. This isn't the end. Rather, it's the true beginning. I didn't change jobs. Instead, I became more actively involved. Weekdays at the insurance company. Weekends volunteering with child abuse prevention organizations. Meeting other mothers with similar experiences, sharing our stories, supporting each other. The new values I've learned there strengthen me. Mom, guess what? I was the fastest runner at school today. April returns from school with bouncing steps. Her cheeks flushed, eyes sparkling as she reports her achievement. That's wonderful. Her smile warms my heart too. The wounds might not have completely disappeared. But we're definitely moving forward. On the living room wall hangs a picture April drew. A family picture. Now it's just April and me. But true happiness is depicted in that drawing. Looking at the two figures holding hands under the sun, I feel hope for the future. In the evening, while preparing dinner in the kitchen, I look out the window. Street lights illuminate one by one. Another day ends, and a new morning will come. Our story has just begun. But I won't hesitate anymore. I'll walk this path together with my child. Dinner is laid out on the table. Steam rises from April's favorite hamburger steak. The sound of "let's eat" echoes in our warm room. The accumulation of small happinesses. This had become our new normal.